the people who used to live in that land, who were expelled forcibly 65 years ago, and who remain exiles to this day and are not being allowed to return to their homes. So there's not a lot of countries that are responsible for those kinds of violations. There are plenty of violations in the world, and I would hope that the people complaining that you spend too much time on Israel are spending a lot of their own time working on stopping all those other human rights violations in all those other countries.
Phyllis, I want to get our other two guests on the panel to weigh in on what you just said. Let's turn now to Ali. Ali, are you there? Ali Abunimah, he's the co-founder of the award-winning online publication, The Electronic Intifada. And also joining us remotely is Lia Tarachansky. She is our Middle East correspondent, and she reports on Israel and the Palestinian territories. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So you just heard a little bit of what Phyllis had to say, but essentially we get this question oftentimes at the Real News. First of all, that we are biased in our coverage of Israel, and that we are tend to side with Israel, which I think we don't, but that is what some people
not tend to side.
There's some people do think that. I've read comments that say that, but there is criticism that says that essentially why do we focus so much attention on Israel and not to places like Phyllis mentioned, like Saudi Arabia, for example?
Well, actually, we do a lot about Saudi Arabia. Usually, people don't watch everything we do, but Ali, let's kind of switch the conversation a little bit. There's been a move recently. There's been this new unity between Hamas and Fatah. And Israel has said we no longer have any kind of partner for peace, that's now this terrorist alliance, and so on and so on. This unity deal has been kind of demanded by Palestinians for a long time, and now there is it. So what changed? Why the unity deal now? And do you think what consequence or effect is it going to have? And what do you make of Israel's argument?
Well, nobody's telling the truth about this unity deal. I guess that's why we need the Real News Network to get right at the truth. First of all, Israel's objections are, I would say, a form of camp. Israel is very dependent on the Palestinian Authority, and they work very closely with the Palestinian Authority, both the Israeli army and the Shin Bet secret police, to control and suppress resistance to Israeli occupation. So Israel is going to whine and cry about this, but they're going to carry on working hand in glove with the Palestinian Authority. That's something that no serious person doubts. As for why this unity happened, I don't think it's the unity that the vast majority of Palestinians want. This is a shotgun marriage between two desperate parties. Hamas, which has been really suffocated in Gaza because of the long-running Israeli siege, but particularly over the past year after the military coup in Egypt, the financial situation, the economic situation in Gaza has become disastrous. Hamas can no longer manage the situation in Gaza economically. And Abbas put all his eggs in the American peace process basket and only ended up with egg on his face. So both sides, both Hamas and Fatah, needed to do something, and this is all they could come up with. But it really doesn't, I think, offer Palestinians much hope in the near future.
Lia, what do you make of Israel's attitude towards the unity deal and generally towards this peace process? I mean, do people take it at all seriously, or do people see it all as kind of theater?
Well, you have to take into account that since the end of the Second Intifada, we've been facing now about 5 years of the quietest time in the country's history. So for an Israeli, there's really no time in history since the creation of the state that there's been so few terrorist attacks and so few threats to the safety of the average civilian. And so we've gotten very comfortable.
A little bit of an audio problem here. Hang on. We lost Lia's audio, and that she was on a. Are we going to quickly fix it? Lia, you there?
Yes.
Okay, you're back. Pick it up about 2 sentences ago.
Yeah, I think you were
most peaceful time.
Yeah,
I think you were in around there.
You know, I was born in Russia, and in Russian we have this expression, "Первый блин комом," which means the first pancake you make will always turn out wrong. So all these, and you called for a joke, so there was. What I was saying was that since the end of the Second Intifada in 2005, roughly, since then, Israelis have had the quietest years since the country's creation in terms of safety. We've never had a time that was safer for the average citizen, and we've never had so few threats. And so last week, I was attending this arms conference that will be in the next story that I'll be covering. And what you hear a lot of the generals and the colonels in the Israeli army talking about constantly at these armed conferences, and especially now, is that the enemy has changed. And so what they basically, one after the other, a dozen or so colonels were going up on the stage and arguing the enemy has changed. And so now we have to change our form of fighting as well. Now, when I came up to them after their talks and asked them, okay, so you say the enemy has changed. How has the enemy changed and who is the enemy? Of course, the people who are forming the Israeli military policy believe that everybody in the world is the enemy. But what they were saying is that today, you can't just go and kill the way that we used to in Kasled. You can't just go and carpet bomb the Gaza Strip the way we did in 2008 and 9. Today, because of the Goldstone report, because of the boycott movement, you have to be very, very precise about what you hit, who you hit, and how you show it to the world. So we can no longer run wars where we don't let journalists in. So having said all of that, when you ask the average Israeli, what do you think about the peace process? I think that most people believe that there should be a reconciliation. But when you ask them, what are you willing to give up for that? Almost nobody is willing to give up really anything. There's a very, very big debate about whether or not to give back the territory of the West Bank. But of course, most people in Israel are against the mass transfer of the settlers. Most people are against giving up the privilege the Jewish citizens have over other citizens in Israel. And they're not even willing to consider the fact that if there is going to be a two-state solution, the Palestinians need total control over their territory, that they need to have an army. If they're going to have a state, it has to be a regular state like all the other states. And this is something that most Israelis are just not willing to accept.
Phyllis, when this new round of the peace process was pushed by President Obama and John Kerry, you and I did an interview and I asked you, what the heck are they thinking? Why are they doing this? It cannot lead anywhere. And I think we both kind of ended up shaking our heads at the end of it.
Yeah.
Well, apparently, Abbas has sworn in the new unity government, the Fatah-Hamas government, and the Americans apparently, I don't know if it's today, but they've just said they are going to work with this government, unlike Israel that says they'll have nothing to do with it. So what do you make of what are Obama Kerry trying to achieve here? Because if Israel doesn't want this to go anywhere, it isn't going to.
No, that's certainly true, and I think that Kerry and Obama knew that. But I think they felt obligated to go through the motions of this. You know, it was early on in this process, Paul, as you reminded us. We called it the Einstein peace process because this was very much in keeping with Einstein's great line about the definition of crazy is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. You know, if it looked like from the outside that that's what Kerry was doing. He was doing the same thing with the same pro-Israel negotiators on the U.S. side, not changing anything about what the 23 years of failed diplomacy had wrought in the past, which was failure. And here he was doing it again. But I think there were issues of timing of what was going on in the region that made this very critical at that time. There was an escalating civil war, rapidly becoming a regional war in Syria. There was a growing sectarian divide as a result of that was exploding across the region. There was the military coup in Egypt. And in all of these cases, as in Libya, where the post-Gaddafi Libya was collapsing into absolute terror and chaos, and the U.S. was unable to deal with any of these processes. The U.S. had nothing to say, nothing to do that was going to show it as a regional superpower that actually could control these processes. So in the context of that, I think that they felt like, okay, we know how to do this peace process stuff, even if we know that it's not really going to go anywhere this time around. There's some questions about what Kerry in particular thought devoting the level of time and attention over these 9.5 months that he did. But clearly, the talks were doomed to failure from the very beginning. I think, Paul, that we talked about it at the time they started, that they were going to fail. We pretty much called out why they were going to fail, because they're not based on international law. They're not based on equality for all. They're not based on UN resolutions. They're based on maintaining Israeli dominance. And as long as that's the basis, it's just not going to work until that changes. And that's one of the things I think we can look at now. The failure of these talks is actually a very good thing. It's ironic when you look at what was the immediate result. Well, the Israelis immediately announced 700 new settlement units and announced, other things that they were going to do, all in direct violation of international law. The Palestinian response was, we are going to sign on to 15 separate human rights and other international covenants, putting us in compliance with those same resolutions, those same international covenants that the Israelis are violating over and over again. And then in the context of that, the U.S. said officially, well, both sides have done things that are not helpful. The Palestinians signed on to human rights covenants. Oh dear. The Israelis announced 700 new settlement units and announced that they were going to refuse to release the 29 last prisoners that they had agreed with under U.S. pressure to release. So in that context, it's like, what do they really think they were doing here?
Yeah. So
if not going through the motions again.
So I want to get Ali back into the conversation. Ali, we know right now we're going through negotiations with Iran. Do you think that's changing up the dynamics between Israel, the United States, everything that's being played out right now?
Well, I think that, many people have correctly read that the Obama administration has defied the Israel lobby over Iran. That's true. Israel wanted a war with Iran, and its lobby in the United States was making that case. But it's a mistake to believe that that translates into benefits for the Palestinians. On the contrary, what I've seen is that the Obama administration, which has been the most pro-Israel administration so far in terms of the substance of its positions, I know that, that may surprise people, but substantively it's been the most pro-Israel administration ever, has become only more so on the Palestinian issue, partly as a way to assuage Israeli wounds over Iran. So the basic deal is, what we can't give you on Iran, we will give you in the currency of Palestinian rights and Palestinian land. So the U.S.-Iranian rapprochement, which is for U.S. hegemonic and imperial interests, has been at the expense of the Palestinians, or at least certainly not to their benefit. Of course, Phyllis is right to draw attention to the regional situation, which of course is in great turmoil. And partly what's happening in Palestine now is as a result of the coup in Egypt, the strong support that the Obama administration and the European Union are giving to the new Sisi dictatorship, which was supposedly legitimized by these sham elections, which are being praised or at least not opposed. And the consequence of that is that Palestinians are under greater pressure than ever in Gaza. And that's partly what drove Hamas into the hands of Abbas. And just remember, the other day in Ramallah, Abbas said, it was a shocking speech that, made a lot of headlines in the Palestinian media, but none in the US. Abbas said before an audience of several hundred visiting Israelis that one thing is sacred. It wasn't Palestinian refugee rights, it wasn't Jerusalem, it wasn't Palestinian land. He's willing to give up on all of those. The one thing that was sacred for Abbas is security coordination with the Israeli occupation. So now we have this strange situation where the Palestinians are effectively being ruled by a coalition of Hamas, Mahmoud Abbas, and the Israeli army. And they're all effectively going to be working together, whether they want to admit it or not. And to me, this underscores the importance of not sitting by and waiting for Obama or Kerry or Abbas or Hamas or whoever else to pull something out of their hat, but to escalate as much as we can on every front the campaign of boycott, divestment, and sanctions. As my colleagues just said, Israel now knows that it's not free to murder and kill and massacre as it used to, because there are other factors in place, and one of those is the accountability and pressure that comes from the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. So we need to take that lesson and escalate that movement, that non-violent movement, to bring accountability, to bring justice, and to bring what Phyllis said, which is the rule of international law.
Lia, how much impact is the boycott, divestment, and sanctions having in Israel? In terms of the broad public opinion, is it sinking in?
Well, before I answer that question, I just have a bone of contention with something that Abunimah said, where he said that Israel wanted to go to war with Iran, and I think that that's not entirely true. I think that there's a faction inside the Likud party, which is headed by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, that does indeed want to go to war in Iran to assert Israeli hegemony in the area, in the region. But we saw when he made it very clear that this was his intention, a huge, basically, rift inside the Israeli security echelon, with one after another former head of every one of the Israeli security institutions, including.
All right, hang on. This is.
Hold
on. You pick it up from including, because your audio went out for a second or two.
Sure. What I was saying was that as soon as it became clear that Netanyahu's faction is intending to go to war with Iran, one after the other, the former and the current heads of all of Israel's intelligence and army institutions warned that this is a very bad idea, that Israel can't stand in such an attack, whether it goes to war with Iran on its own or if it goes to war with the United States. And we've seen in the number of these, if you're watching the various forums, the security forums in Israel, we've seen only an increase in these voices over the last 4 years. So I don't think it's safe to say that Israel wanted to go to war with Iran. I think that's a very simplistic analysis.
I'm going to jump in. I think Phyllis had to leave. She had given us a hard time out. Phyllis is still there. Phyllis?
I'm still there. I said 5 more minutes.
Okay, cool. So, we got a little of a debate going on here. I don't know if you want to weigh in on this, Phyllis, or you want to say one thing before you go.
Well, I'll say one thing, which is, I think...
Ali, I'm going to give you a chance to go right after Phyllis.
No, I just wanted to say I also am under time pressure. I have...
Everybody is busy today.
All right, okay.
It's a big news day, so I've got everything buzzing.
All right, okay, I'll tell you what. Everybody gets a quick last word. Phyllis, you first.
My last word is just that I think the U.S. has worked to take advantage of the distinction between what the differences in the Israeli security authorities, those who want to go to war and those who want to use the threat, the claimed false threat that Iran poses to Israel. The only threat that Iran poses is, even if at some point it wanted to get a nuclear weapon, which it has every indicated not wanting to do so, but if it did, what it would threaten is Israel's nuclear monopoly. It would not even then be a real existential threat to the people of Israel, for the same reasons.
Exactly.
Well, we won't go into our time, but the U.S. has taken advantage of that fear in Israel regarding Iran to use that as bringing out new pressures against the Palestinians.
Right.
And it's absolute that the Palestinians, more than anyone else, have paid the price for Israel's attacks on Iran.
All right, thanks, Phyllis. I know you got to run. Ali, last word.
Thank you.
Well, stepping back from some of this towards the big picture, I think the question is what happens now. You know, the peace process that Obama and Kerry had invested so much in is dead. The Hamas and Abbas have run out of options. Israel has no way forward. Their only strategy is to contain the Palestinians with walls and fences and carrots and sticks. The settlements continue to grow. And the question is, where does this go now? A fundamental rethink is needed, a fundamentally new approach. And you don't see that coming from the United States or from Israeli leaders or even from Palestinian leaders. It seems to me the only place it is coming from is from the grassroots, and that's why you have to pay attention and listen very closely to what's happening there. And often those signals that can be very revealing about what's coming next are missed when you're looking only at the mainstream media and mainstream commentators and messaging.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Ali. And Lia, last word. In fact, you've been, I think, one of the few people covering the Middle East that has been covering, certainly in Israel and in occupied territories, a lot of grassroots organizing and movement. But last word from you, Lia.
So I just wanted to finish on the fact that there's indeed a lot of attention paid to the boycott movement here in Israel. And I think that what we've seen more than anything in the recent months and in the past year and a half is the real weakness of Netanyahu and his faction. We didn't only see it with the fact that under his 2 terms in office, the boycott movement has become stronger than ever, which is something he's going to be remembered for. We also saw that he lost on Iran. We saw also that his foreign minister, Avigdor Lieberman, is positioning himself to be the next prime minister, as now being a lot more moderate voice and playing to the Americans, playing to the Europeans as being a good choice for the next election. But we also see that today, the Palestinian prisoners in administrative detention are on a 50-day hunger strike. And the prime minister is brought to his knees, saying that there's nothing we can do to stop it except forcefully feed them, which is, of course, against international human rights law. And the biggest, I think, example of his weakness in the recent months is the elections to the presidency. Shimon Peres, the current president, is coming out, and the next president, who's likely going to be Reuven Rivlin, the former Speaker of the Knesset, is a personal rival of Netanyahu. And in the process of trying to get him unelected, Netanyahu has tried to cancel the presidency altogether and failed. He tried to postpone the presidency elections and failed. He tried to get anybody else from his party to run and failed. And in fact, tried to move other parties to move against Rivlin and again failed. And it looks like Rivlin will be the next president of Israel. So
Prime Minister.
No.
President. Lieberman?
No. The Israeli prime minister, Rivlin, is going to be the president. The presidency in Israel is kind of a nominal position. Most of what the president does is make speeches and work.
I misunderstood what you're saying, but how likely is it that Lieberman will be the next prime minister?
Right now, we've seen that Lieberman has come out on Channel 2 in a very well-watched television programming and basically presenting himself as the new moderate voice. And he's been doing that in every possible forum, at every speech that he's done in the last 6 months, trying to put himself as a different kind of Lieberman than the kind of Lieberman he was even 6 months ago. On Channel 2, he said, maybe I was, a little bit more aggressive when I was younger, but now I'm coming to understand that you need to make compromises. He's referring to himself 6 months before. And in fact, he's taking every precaution possible to go against Netanyahu and present Netanyahu as weak. And Lieberman, of course, being tagged as the strong leader, he's got a very, very good chance of becoming the next prime minister of Israel.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Lia.
Thanks for joining us.